The Zelzar Galactic Empire did not issue threats lightly. For over 3,000 cycles, they had ruled the stars with calculated ruthlessness, crushing civilizations under the weight of their vast military might. Their latest target? A seemingly insignificant backwater planet called Earth. To the Supreme Chancellor Vrothal, the decision to bring humanity into compliance was not one of war, it was one of necessity. Earth was erratic, unpredictable, and worst of all, it refused to acknowledge the authority of the Galactic Empire. That could not stand. The holographic transmission flickered to life in the United Nations Galactic Affairs Chamber, a sterile, overly lit room in Geneva, where Earth's diplomatic representatives handled extraterrestrial relations. The towering armor-clad form of Supreme Chancellor Vrothal loomed over the delegation, his presence a perfect mix of imperial menace and bureaucratic exhaustion. His yellowed eyes glowed beneath his ridged brow, his voice an echoing boom as he spoke. "People of Earth," he began, each syllable carefully measured for intimidation. "This is your final warning. The Zelzar Empire has tolerated your transgressions for too long. Your species has failed to adhere to intergalactic order, disregarded every attempt at diplomatic alignment, and refused compliance with basic universal law. Your primitive world has been deemed a potential threat. Submit now or face obliteration." The assembled human diplomats reacted with a mix of stifled yawns, half-hearted note-taking, and one man in the back subtly checking his phone. The ultimatum was received as well as a memo about a company-wide policy change, mild interest, a touch of irritation, but ultimately something to be ignored until it became an actual problem. In the middle of it all, sipping from a travel mug labeled "World's Okayest Diplomat," sat Veronica Ronnie Rutherford. She barely glanced up from her tablet, where she was scrolling through an online debate about whether Die Hard was a Christmas movie. She tapped her mic lazily. "Uh-huh. Yep. We hear you, buddy." Chancellor Vrothal's imposing visage twitched, his warlords murmuring in disbelief behind him. "Do you understand the gravity of this situation? You stand at the precipice of destruction." Ronnie sighed, adjusting her bathrobe. "Okay, cool. And what, exactly, do you expect us to do about it?" "You will surrender your sovereignty and adhere to the laws of the Empire." "Uh-huh. Let me think." She pretended to consider it for all of 2 seconds before going back to her tablet. "Yeah, no." Vrothal blinked. "Excuse me." "Nope. Not interested." Ronnie took a long sip of her coffee. "But hey, thanks for checking in. We'll get back to you when we're not busy." The War Council behind him erupted into murmurs of disbelief. One of the generals, a four-eyed reptilian with a penchant for dramatic gesturing, hissed, "They're toying with us, Supreme Chancellor. This is a tactic of psychological warfare." Ronnie glanced at the clock on the wall. "Listen, I appreciate the whole ominous Space Emperor routine really, but you kinda called at a bad time. My lunch is getting cold, and I'm guessing this threat thing isn't really urgent, since you know we're still here." Vrothal clenched his massive fists. "You will regret this insolence." Sure, she said, waving him off. "Listen, I'm going to put you on hold for just a sec." The transmission cut off. Back in the Galactic War Room, silence fell over the Empire's leadership. The Supreme Chancellor, who had crushed countless civilizations, sat utterly motionless, his mind struggling to comprehend what had just transpired. "Did she put us on hold?" one warlord asked, as if saying it out loud might make it less real. The communications officer confirmed it. "It would appear so, sir." Vrothal's face darkened. "They are playing a dangerous game." Meanwhile, Ronnie leaned back in her chair, stretching. "So what's for lunch?" The diplomatic officer beside her, a tired man who had long given up on maintaining professionalism in her presence, gave her a look. "You just dismissed an intergalactic war declaration." "I sure did," she said, digging into a leftover pizza box. "They could attack Earth at any moment." "Yeah, but will they?" "They're an empire, Ronnie. A massive, militarized civilization." She took another bite. "And they just got dismissed like a spam call. What do you think that does to an intergalactic warlord's ego?" That he had no answer for. The next 3 days were eerily quiet. No immediate bombardments, no sudden planetary takeovers. no fleets blotting out the sun. The world continued as it always had, largely unaware that the threat of annihilation had been temporarily delayed by an indifferent woman with a caffeine addiction. Inside the Imperial War Room, the Zelzar High Command was deep in an emergency strategy session. Every holographic projection, every ancient military text, every recorded war campaign was being analyzed, reanalyzed, and overanalyzed. "They are unlike any species we've encountered," one strategist said. "They do not fear us. They must be concealing something," another muttered. Vrothal paced the chamber, his mind a battlefield of clashing emotions. "Perhaps they are waiting for us to make the first move. A test of strength." The room collectively nodded. That made sense. Earth's refusal to acknowledge their dominance couldn't possibly be out of sheer disinterest. It had to be some kind of ploy. They must be luring us into a trap. Again, more nods. "Then we must strike first." Murmurs of agreement filled the chamber. The Empire would deploy a first-strike fleet, not to obliterate, but to demonstrate power. A show of force, overwhelming and undeniable. Back on Earth, Ronnie received an update on the Empire's movement while making a fresh cup of coffee. She skimmed the report, then deleted the email. A few minutes later, the intern working in the communications office knocked on her door. "Ma'am, the Galactic Empire is mobilizing." "Cool," she said, stirring creamer into her mug. "They'll be here in less than 24 hours. "Uh-huh." She took a sip. The intern hesitated. "Shouldn't we do something?" Ronnie sighed, rubbing her temples. "Look, kid, they're probably going to do some big, flashy entrance, maybe shoot a laser or two. Then we'll send a strongly worded email. They'll huff and puff, and eventually they'll get bored." "They might not get bored. Have you seen how human wars go? We spend months just arguing about which font to use for military memos. These guys are used to swift conquests. The moment they realize they have to deal with bureaucratic red tape, they'll beg to leave." But a new message popped up on her screen. A second ultimatum. She clicked it open, skimmed it, then hit mark as unread. The intern gawked. "You're ignoring them?" "I'm multitasking," she corrected. "This coffee isn't going to drink itself." The Supreme Chancellor's rage reached a boiling point as reports confirmed their message had been left unread. The invasion fleet had already been launched, but doubts festered among the warlords. Had they underestimated Earth? Was this some advanced form of subterfuge? By the time the Zelzar fleet reached Earth's orbit, ready to unleash overwhelming power, they were met with an unexpected sight: a giant neon billboard blinking on the International Space Station. It read, "Office closed. Try again Monday." Inside her office, Ronnie leaned back, feet on the desk, sipping her coffee as she watched the alien warships hesitate in real time. She smirked. Checkmate. The Zelzar Empire's fleet entered Earth's orbit with the grace of a conquering armada, their warships forming an imposing blockade around the planet. 1,000 generations of imperial doctrine dictated that fear preceded victory. Planets crumbled under the mere sight of their arrival, surrendering before the first shot was fired. The invasion force was prepared for swift compliance, a token show of resistance, and ultimately, the triumphant raising of the Empire's banner over humanity's most significant cities. Instead, they were met with silence. Commander Kristak, a seasoned veteran of planetary subjugation, narrowed his many eyes as he watched Earth's surface through the ship's observation deck. There was no panic. No mass evacuations, no missile launches, no desperate pleas for mercy. Earth remained utterly indifferent to their presence. His mandibles clicked in frustration as he opened a channel to the Supreme Chancellor. "They are unbothered." His voice held a slight quiver, a detail he would later deny. "Scanners detect no defensive mobilization, no planetary shields. Nothing." Supreme Chancellor Vrothal, monitoring the operation from the Imperial War Room, exhaled sharply. The humans were making a mockery of them. Again. "Then proceed with the first strike," he ordered, his voice edged with simmering fury. "A controlled bombardment. Minimal damage, maximum intimidation." The fleet's main battleship, the Wrath of Zelzar, charged its primary cannon, an energy weapon capable of reducing mountains to rubble. The targeting system locked onto a significant metropolitan area, and with a calculated pulse, the first blast of the invasion was unleashed. The impact was less than spectacular. The beam struck its target, a large reflective tower in the heart of a city, only to refract harmlessly off its mirrored surface and scatter in several directions. One stray blast obliterated a disused parking lot. Another hit an abandoned warehouse, which promptly collapsed in a slow, anticlimactic heap. The final beam managed to trigger a series of fireworks from a nearby festival, setting off a brilliant, colorful explosion that the citizens mistook for a scheduled display. From their vantage point, the fleet commanders watched in stunned silence as Earth's people cheered. They think it's a celebration, an officer whispered in horror. "This planet is cursed," muttered another. Undeterred, Christak ordered the second phase, a ground invasion. Surely, this would yield results. The first wave of drop pods descended into Earth's atmosphere, carrying elite shock troops armed with state-of-the-art plasma rifles. The pods landed in what was believed to be an ideal invasion zone, a warm, swampy region detected as having a low human population density. The Empire had no knowledge of Florida. The doors to the pods hissed open, revealing a landscape teeming with hazards that had nothing to do with human defenses. Before a single soldier could establish a formation, the first casualty was reported. "Commander, we have lost Trooper Zale." "What? How?" A brief, horrific pause. "An indigenous life form," the scout's voice wavered. It removed him from the pod." Christak stiffened. "Describe the creature." The comms officer, still reviewing the footage, gulped. "A bipedal reptile, strong jaw structure, massive teeth. It moved at an alarming speed, and wait, it's attacking again." Another scream. The channel cut to static. Elsewhere in the invasion zone, squads attempting to establish a perimeter encountered hostile native combatants. They were human, but their behavior defied all logic. A shirtless, sunburnt man wielding nothing but a folding chair ambushed an entire unit, incapacitating them before vanishing into the underbrush. Another squad was outmaneuvered by a group of senior citizens driving motorized scooters at reckless speeds, their purses wielded with deadly precision. One trooper, wounded but alive, sent a desperate message back to the fleet. "They do not follow conventional warfare tactics. Request immediate extraction." Above the battlefield, Christak watched the disaster unfold in real time. This is highly irregular," he muttered, gripping the edges of his control panel. "Where is the counterattack? Where are their soldiers?" The answer came in the form of an unexpected broadcast. On every screen aboard the fleet, a new transmission interrupted their status reports. A human male, dressed in a garish suit, stood before a brightly lit stage. "Welcome, folks, to breaking news. We interrupt our regularly scheduled programming to bring you some truly bizarre developments. Aliens, yes, actual space aliens, have landed in Florida. Let's go to live footage." The transmission cut to grainy, handheld phone footage. A Zelzar soldier was seen running for his life as a man in a Hawaiian shirt and flip-flops pursued him with a makeshift flamethrower crafted from an aerosol can and a lighter. The trooper screamed something unintelligible before leaping into a nearby canal, only to be dragged under by another unidentified reptilian creature. The news anchor returned, barely holding back laughter. "I have to say, this is the worst invasion attempt I've ever seen. And I saw Mars attacks in theaters." Back on the wrath of Zelzar, Christak clutched his head in horror. "They're mocking us." At the Empire's command center, Vrothal had gone completely still, his rage now something cold and quiet. "Withdraw the troops," he ordered. Christak hesitated. "But Supreme Chancellor." "Withdraw them." The recall orders were issued immediately. Escape pods fired from ground, carrying what few soldiers remained back to the safety of the fleet. The moment the last soldier was accounted for, the fleet activated its warp drives and vanished from orbit in utter disgrace. Earth, once again, barely noticed. Ronnie Rutherford, sipping a fresh cup of coffee, watched the report play out on her tablet. Her inbox was flooded with diplomatic inquiries, most of which she had no intention of answering. Her phone rang. She answered without looking. "Ronnie here." "You mock them," the voice on the other end said, half accusation, half incredulity. It was the Secretary General of the UN, who, unlike her, still took these things seriously. "I didn't mock them. They mocked themselves." She took a slow sip. "I just let nature take its course." "They fled," he continued. "The most feared empire in the galaxy ran from Earth." "Sounds like a them problem." A pause. "Then what happens now?" Ronnie smirked. "Well, they'll either come back twice as pissed off, or they'll rethink their entire place in the universe." She set her cup down, stretching her arms behind her head as she looked out the window at the vast, unbothered planet below. "Either way, I think we just became the scariest species in the galaxy." The Supreme Chancellor of the Zelzar Empire had not known true humiliation until now. Vrothal sat motionless in the Imperial War Room, his warlords and strategists avoiding eye contact, their usual arrogant confidence shattered like brittle glass. The invasion had been a catastrophe. The fleet had fled in disgrace. The name Earth had already become a whispered warning among lesser empires. 4 days, he had sought an answer. Surely there had to be an explanation. It could not be incompetence. The Zelzar military was the most advanced force in the known universe. It could not be superior strategy. Earth had barely lifted a finger in their own defense. No, this was something else. Something intangible, something terrifying. "They do not follow the laws of war," one of his advisors said at last, his voice uncertain. "They do not fight like any other species." Vrothal exhaled slowly, steepling his fingers. "They do not fear like any other species." He leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "Send a diplomatic request." Gasps filled the chamber. The word diplomacy had never before been uttered in the same breath as humanity. Diplomacy was something used for civilizations who understood order, not for creatures who saw an invasion fleet in their skies and ignored it. A junior officer hesitated. "Supreme Chancellor, we do not negotiate with primitives." Vrothal's gaze was cold. "Are they primitives?" The room fell silent. The transmission was sent. Ronnie Rutherford received the diplomatic request while standing in line at a coffee shop. She skimmed the message while waiting for the barista to finish making her triple-shot macchiato with extra foam. The wording was exactly what she expected, formal, slightly condescending, and trying very hard not to sound desperate. They wanted to arrange a meeting, to reassess the conditions of interspecies relations. Which was, of course, their way of saying we don't want to admit we lost, but also, please don't make us deal with your terrifyingly unhinged planet again. She took a sip of her coffee, enjoying the way the steam curled against the autumn air. A diplomatic meeting could be interesting. Or, at the very least, it could be funny. Her reply was short and to the point. "Sure. Bring snacks." When the Supreme Chancellor received the response, his eye twitched. He had anticipated many things, resistance, conditions, perhaps even demands. What he had not expected was a casual confirmation, followed by a request for snacks. The warlords, already shaken by their prior encounters, took this as yet another sign that humanity operated on a level of warfare so advanced it transcended traditional battlefields. They had turned diplomacy itself into psychological warfare. Nevertheless, arrangements were made. A neutral location was selected, an orbital space station, halfway between Earth and the nearest Zelzar stronghold. The delegation was prepared with extreme caution. The finest negotiators in the Empire were hand-selected, their skills in manipulation and coercion sharpened over decades. Every possible human trick, every known method of subterfuge was studied. And then they met Ronnie Rutherford. She arrived 20 minutes late. No formal attire. No ceremonial greetings. She wore sunglasses indoors, carried a drink with an obscene amount of whipped cream on top, and the first words out of her mouth were, "Sorry, had to stop for caffeine." The Supreme Chancellor, seated at the long, gleaming table, studied her with the gaze of a man trying to solve an impossible equation. He had fought wars across countless systems, had crushed rebellions with a single command, had made emperors bow with nothing but a whisper. And yet, before him sat this human, utterly relaxed, entirely unbothered, and clearly holding all the power in the room. A warlord cleared his throat, attempting to seize control of the moment. "Human," he began, "you stand before the Supreme Chancellor of the Zelzar Empire. Show respect." Ronnie took a slow sip of her drink. "Sure. What's up, Chuck?" The silence that followed was thick enough to bend gravity. The warlord's eyes bulged. "His name is Vrathal." Ronnie snapped her fingers. "Right, my bad. Chuck was my last landlord. Guy kept raising rent, so I assumed the vibes were the same." Vrathal exhaled sharply through his nose. "Human," he said, his voice carefully controlled. "We are here to discuss the terms of peace." "Cool. Love peace." She stretched, cracking her back. "So what's in it for us?" Another pause. One of the Zelzar strategists whispered. We assumed they would be the ones asking that question. Vrathal ignored him. "We are prepared to offer technological advancements in return for your cooperation." Ronnie raised an eyebrow. "We already have internet and coffee machines. What else you got?" The War Council, who had expected this to be a straightforward negotiation, looked increasingly lost. They were offering advanced technology, and yet the human looked entirely unimpressed. "We could provide energy solutions," one of them offered. "We have nuclear," Ronnie replied. "Interstellar travel." SpaceX is working on it. Planetary shielding." "Sounds expensive." One of the warlords slammed his fist on the table. "What do you want?" Ronnie leaned back, considering. "Couple things, actually." The Empire braced itself. "First, I want one of those alien coffee makers. The ones you guys have that never run out of beans? That's priority number one." Vrathal blinked. "You wish to negotiate for coffee?" "Yes. Also, I want exclusive streaming rights to any and all intergalactic entertainment. You got space soap operas? We want them. Live gladiator matches? Put M on pay-per-view." The Supreme Chancellor struggled to process this. "And that is all." "Oh no," she said. "One more thing. You know those fancy spaceships you guys have? I want one." An uncomfortable shuffle passed through the delegation. "A warship?" one of them asked hesitantly. "Nah, I don't need weapons," she waved a hand. "I just want it painted pink with glitter. Maybe throw in some fuzzy dice on the dashboard." Vrathal could not tell if she was serious. He could not tell anything anymore. They agreed. The meeting concluded faster than any of the warlords could have anticipated. Instead of political maneuvering or aggressive back-and-forths, humanity's representative had taken the greatest empire in the galaxy and somehow turned them into a glorified Amazon delivery service. As Ronnie strolled toward the exit, Vrathal called out, "Do you truly expect this arrangement to last? Do you believe Earth can maintain such dominance?" She paused, glancing over her shoulder. "Oh, Chuck," she said with a smirk, "you're still assuming we're trying." With that, she walked out, leaving the most powerful rulers in the known universe wondering whether Earth was a force beyond comprehension or if they had simply encountered a species too stubborn to be conquered. Back aboard the Imperial command ship, the warlords sat in stunned silence. One of them finally spoke. What do we do now?" Vrathal, still watching the door Ronnie had walked through, exhaled. "We send them their damn coffee machine." The Zelzar Empire had conquered hundreds of worlds, subdued entire species, and ruled the galaxy with an iron grip for millennia. Yet for the first time in their history, they found themselves in an unfathomable position, paying tribute to a civilization that barely acknowledged them. It had started small, a coffee machine, some entertainment rights, a single pink-painted starship with glitter-coated thrusters. But the requests kept coming, and the Empire kept obliging. Not out of weakness, not even out of obligation. They did it out of fear. Because if Earth's disinterest in war was terrifying, the thought of them suddenly taking an interest was worse. At first, the galaxy was slow to react. Other empires, distant and cautious, merely watched from the shadows, waiting to see what would become of this odd arrangement. When the news spread that the mighty Zelzar Empire had conceded to human demands without so much as a skirmish, it sent ripples of confusion through the political landscape. Other species, long oppressed under Zelzar rule, took notice. If the warlords of the Empire, the most feared beings in the known universe, now bent to the whims of a single human woman who valued coffee more than conquest. What did that mean for the balance of power? The first defection happened quietly. A mid-ranking Zelzar fleet commander, seeing the absurdity of the situation, abandoned his post and fled to Earth. When questioned, he simply stated, "I want to understand their ways." He was last seen at a New Jersey diner, enthusiastically consuming pancakes. Then came the traders, the merchants, the mercenaries. The more they interacted with humanity, the more they realized something chilling. Earth was strange in ways that defied all galactic norms. Their economy was chaotic, yet somehow efficient. Their humor was incomprehensible, yet strangely compelling. Their culture was a bizarre amalgamation of historical eras, artistic movements, and meme-based interactions that evolved faster than any AI could track. The tipping point came when an alien delegation mistakenly purchased a bulk shipment of obsolete human technology, brick-like cell phones from the early 2000s. They had assumed these indestructible devices were some kind of ancient human weapon. When tests confirmed that they were, in fact, more durable than most standard armor plating, the market for Earth weapons exploded overnight. Ronnie Rutherford received this information via email. She skimmed the report, chuckled, and promptly forwarded it to the Secretary General with the subject line, "LOL WTF." The Secretary General called her immediately. "Do you have any idea what's happening?" Vaguely. She stirred her coffee. "The economy is shifting, Ronnie. Zelzar warlords are defecting to Earth. Trade routes are being rewritten. You've managed to convince the entire galaxy that humanity is a superpower." Ronnie took a sip. "Neat. This is serious. We just sold an empire's worth of outdated cell phones as weapons. Do you know what that means?" "Yeah." She paused. "We should probably sell them CD players next." There was silence on the other end of the call. Then, in a voice filled with weary acceptance, the Secretary General muttered, "You're terrifying." It was only the beginning. Galactic crime syndicates learned, to their dismay, that Earth's financial systems were a labyrinth of legal loopholes and tax codes so convoluted that even the most advanced AI struggled to navigate them. Some tried to exploit these systems, only to be outmaneuvered by mid-level human accountants who had survived decades of IRS audits. Diplomatic assemblies that had once dismissed humanity as a primitive species now found themselves carefully crafting treaties that would not inadvertently trigger the wrath of a planet that had defeated the greatest empire in the galaxy without even trying. Meanwhile, the Zelzar leadership was crumbling under the weight of its own confusion. Their once proud warlords had lost the will to fight, instead obsessed with trivial human distractions. Vrothal himself found his advisors increasingly disengaged. A recent War Council meeting had devolved into a debate about whether pineapple belonged on pizza. "This is madness," Vrothal whispered, staring at his people, once conquerors, now fascinated by human media. "We have lost our way." A general turned to him, an unsettling gleam in his eyes. "Supreme Chancellor, have you tried video games?" That was the moment he knew the Empire was finished. When the official declaration came, the galaxy held its breath. The Supreme Chancellor of the Zelzar Empire, the most powerful figure in known space, formally announced his retirement. His reasoning was simple: "I no longer understand this universe." The empire collapsed in the following weeks, not through war, not through rebellion, but through sheer disinterest. The younger generations, having embraced human culture, saw no reason to continue the path of conquest. Instead, they pursued business degrees. For the first time in history, an empire had fallen because its people had collectively decided that ruling the galaxy simply wasn't fun anymore. Ronnie was enjoying a beachside margarita when the news broke. She barely reacted, only raising her glass in a silent toast. The universe, once governed by rigid empires and militaristic discipline, was now casual. And humanity? Humanity had become the true power of the galaxy. Not through weapons, not through strategy, but by simply existing. They had shown the rest of the universe what it meant to be unpredictable, and now the galactic order had adjusted accordingly. A notification popped up on her screen. A message from the former Supreme Chancellor. She opened it. It read, "I surrender. To what I no longer know. Perhaps to reality itself." She smirked. "Welcome to the human experience."